This is breaking news coming out of the United States, marking a pivotal moment in modern American history. We are receiving confirmed reports from inside the West Wing that the transition of power is not just complete, but is already operating at a velocity that has caught experienced Washington observers off guard. Moments ago, sources close to the administration confirmed that a series of executive actions have been signed. Actions that do not merely adjust policy, but fundamentally restructure the operational hierarchy of the executive branch. This is not the slow-moving bureaucracy the Capitol is used to. This is a rapid-fire dismantling and rebuilding of the federal apparatus, happening in real time. What we are witnessing right now is the realization of a campaign promise that many dismissed as rhetoric, but is now manifesting as the new reality of the American government. The atmosphere around Pennsylvania Avenue is described by insiders as tense, focused, and incredibly quiet. There is no chaos, but rather a deliberate, almost mechanical execution of a pre-planned strategy. We are seeing reports of senior career officials in key agencies, the Pentagon, the Department of Justice, and the intelligence community, being relieved of their duties effective immediately. The scope of these personnel changes suggests this is not a standard reshuffle. It is a systematic reset of the federal workforce. To understand the magnitude of what is unfolding this morning, we have to look past the headlines and into the machinery of the presidency itself. We are told that the Oval Office has already been physically reconfigured, a symbolic and literal shift in tone. But the real story is happening behind closed doors in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, where new directives are being issued to agency heads. The message is clear. The constraints of the past 4 years are gone. This is a return to power that comes with the weight of experience and a specific list of grievances to address. The question that is rippling through the corridors of power right now is simple, yet terrifying for some and exhilarating for others. Just how far will this go in the first 24 hours? As we move from the breaking updates into the deeper story, the context here is vital. This is not 2016. The learning curve that defined the first term has been eliminated. The team entering the White House today is not a patchwork of rival factions, but a streamlined unit of loyalists who understand exactly how the levers of government work and how to pull them. What has changed inside the White House is not just the occupant, but the very philosophy of governance. We are seeing the implementation of a strategy that has been refined in exile, designed to bypass traditional bureaucratic bottlenecks. The silence in the usually bustling hallways of the West Wing is perhaps the most telling detail we have gathered so far. In previous administrations, transitions were often noisy, chaotic affairs filled with leaks and jostling for position. Today, the silence is heavy. It speaks of a discipline that was absent before. Staffers are moving with a sense of urgency that suggests they know the clock is ticking. Every minute is being utilized to entrench the new agenda before legal challenges can be mounted. This is a shock and awe strategy applied to domestic governance, designed to overwhelm the opposition with the sheer volume of changes. One of the most significant developments we are tracking is the immediate reinstatement of Schedule F, an executive authority that reclassifies tens of thousands of civil service positions, stripping them of tenure protections and making them effectively at-will employees. This is the mechanism that allows for the sneak to the draining of the swamp, to move from a slogan to a tangible administrative purge. We are hearing that letters of resignation are not being waited for. Termination notices are being prepared. This fundamentally alters the relationship between the president and the permanent bureaucracy, effectively ending the era of the independent civil servant in policy-making roles. The mood inside the agencies is reportedly one of stunned disbelief. Career officials who have served through multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat, are finding their security clearances under review or their access to sensitive compartmentalized information suspended pending re-evaluation. This creates a bottleneck of information flow that centralizes power directly within the White House inner circle. The traditional interagency process, where policies are debated and refined by experts across different departments, appears to be suspended in favor of direct directives from the top. But this return to power is about more than just firing people. It is about the physical and psychological recapture of the narrative. The press briefing room, usually a theater of combat between the press secretary and the media, has seen a shift in access rules. New credentials are being issued, and established norms regarding press engagement are being rewritten. The administration is signaling that it will bypass traditional media filters entirely, speaking directly to the public through its own channels. This creates a closed loop of information that changes how reality is perceived by the electorate. As we look deeper into the architecture of this new administration, we see a distinct shift in foreign policy infrastructure. The National Security Council is being reshaped not just in personnel, but in function. We are learning that the globalist view, the idea that American interests are inextricably tied to international alliances and multilateral agreements, is being systematically scrubbed from policy documents. In its place is a stark transactional realism. The mood in the Situation Room has shifted from consultation to command. Allies who were used to a predictable, if sometimes slow, American partner are now facing a White House that demands immediate reciprocity. The impact of these changes is already being felt beyond the Beltway. Lobbyists on K Street, who typically thrive on their connections and ability to navigate the bureaucracy, are finding their old maps useless. The access points have changed. The old establishment Republicans, who once acted as a bridge between the donor class and the populist base, are finding themselves locked out. The power center has shifted entirely to a new elite, one that is populist in rhetoric but ruthless in execution. This disconnect is creating a sense of unease in the financial markets, which crave stability, yet there's also a sector of the economy that is rallying, betting on deregulation and aggressive protectionism. What is perhaps most striking is the speed at which the cultural symbols of the presidency are being reclaimed. The visual language of the White House is changing. Portraits are being swapped, drapery changed, but these aesthetic choices signal a deeper ideological restoration. It is a visual rejection of the interim years, a declaration that the previous administration was an aberration, a pause in the real timeline of American greatness. This psychological warfare is effective. It demoralizes opponents and energizes supporters who see these symbols as proof of victory. However, the human cost of this rapid transition is beginning to emerge. We are receiving accounts of mid-level staffers, people with mortgages, and families who believed their jobs were non-political, packing boxes in tears. There is a palpable fear of retribution, not just losing a job, but being blacklisted from future government service or corporate roles that do business with the government. This climate of fear is a powerful tool. It ensures compliance among those who remain. The message is being received loud and clear. Loyalty is the primary metric of competence. It is important to pause and reflect on the historical parallel here. This is not unprecedented in the history of nations, but it is rare in the modern history of the United States. We are witnessing the consolidation of executive power on a scale that tests the very elasticity of the Constitution. Legal scholars are already raising alarms, pointing out that while many of these actions are technically within the purview of the president, the cumulative effect is a stress test for the system of checks and balances. But the administration seems unbothered by the prospect of litigation. In fact, they seem to welcome it, framing every court battle as a fight between the will of the people and an unelected judicial elite. As night falls on Washington on this first day of the new era, the lights in the West Wing remain blazing. The work is not stopping. The standard 9-to-5 rhythm of government has been replaced by a crisis management tempo. But there is no external crisis driving this. The crisis is the system itself, as defined by the new president. He has returned with a mandate that he interprets as absolute. The adults in the room, a phrase often used during his first term to describe the generals and establishment figures who curbed his impulses, are gone. They have been replaced by enablers who view their role not as guardrails, but as accelerators. This shift in internal dynamics raises a critical question that we must ask as we continue to cover this unfolding story. If the internal resistance is gone, if the bureaucracy is tamed, and if the party is fully unified behind one man, what happens when the first true external crisis hits? The mechanisms of dissent and debate that often slow down decision-making also serve as quality control. With those mechanisms dismantled, the White House is now a high-speed vehicle with a powerful engine, but we have yet to see if the brakes still work. The transformation we are describing is not just about policy papers or personnel files. It is about the soul of the institution. The White House has stood for over 2 centuries as a symbol of continuity. Even amidst fierce partisan battles, there was an underlying agreement on the permanence of the institutions. Today, that agreement feels fragile. The people walking the halls tonight view the institutions themselves as the enemy. They are not there to steward the government. They are there to conquer it. This is a fundamental change in the DNA of the executive branch. We must also consider the ripple effect this has on the legislative branch. With the White House moving at this breakneck speed, Congress is struggling to keep up. The traditional oversight role of the legislature is being challenged by an executive branch that simply refuses to recognize the old norms of cooperation. We are hearing reports of committee requests being ignored and subpoenas being prepared to be challenged on the grounds of executive privilege. This sets the stage for a constitutional showdown that could define the next 4 years. But for the average American watching this at home, the question is less about constitutional theory and more about daily reality. How does this change inside the White House affect the price of gas, the safety of the streets, or the security of the nation? The administration argues that this streamlining will unleash prosperity and restore order. They claim that the chaos of the past was caused by the friction of the deep state resisting the will of the voter. Now that the friction is being removed, they promise a golden age. Critics, however, see the removal of that friction as the removal of the very safety nets that prevent tyranny. As we look at the verified reports coming in from the Pentagon, the picture becomes even more complex. The relationship between the commander-in-chief and the military brass has always been delicate, but it is now undergoing a radical redefinition. The emphasis is shifting away from social programs within the military and back toward raw lethality and readiness. But with a caveat, the leadership must be aligned with the president's worldview. The fear among career officers is that the military, traditionally the most apolitical of institutions, is being politicized to a degree never seen before. The restructuring of the military hierarchy is only the prelude to a much broader and more visceral transformation taking place within the Department of Justice. Sources inside the DOJ headquarters are describing an atmosphere that can only be called a hostile takeover. The traditional firewall that has existed between the White House and the Attorney General, a norm established post-Watergate to prevent political interference, is being dismantled brick by brick. We are seeing the swift installation of acting officials who view the department not as an independent arbiter of the law, but as the legal sword and shield of the presidency. The investigations that once loomed over the president are effectively dead, buried under new administrative priorities. But the energy has not dissipated. It has merely reversed direction. The focus is shifting aggressively toward investigating political adversaries, leaks, and what the administration terms institutional corruption. This pivot in legal philosophy is sending shockwaves through the federal law enforcement community. FBI agents who operate on the front lines of domestic intelligence are finding their mandates altered. The priority list is being rewritten to reflect the president's campaign promises. We are seeing a reallocation of resources away from white-collar oversight and environmental regulations, funneling strictly into immigration enforcement and urban crime initiatives. The message from the top is that the soft-on-crime era is over, replaced by a doctrine of absolute enforcement. For the agents on the ground, this creates a conflict between their training and due process and the pressure for immediate, televised results. Moving from the marble halls of Washington to the streets of American cities, the impact of this transition is becoming visible in real time. The promise of mass deportations, once dismissed by critics as logistical impossibilities, is being operationalized with military precision. We are receiving reports of National Guard units being mobilized in ways that challenge the Posse Comitatus Act, acting as force multipliers for ICE agents. This is not happening in the shadows. It is being showcased. The administration wants the public to see the buses and the flights. For half the country, these images represent the restoration of the rule of law and national sovereignty. For the other half, they represent a humanitarian nightmare and a betrayal of the American ethos. The polarization is no longer just ideological, it is physical, playing out in neighborhoods where families are preparing for the knock on the door. Economically, the America First doctrine is moving from rhetoric to rigid policy with breathtaking speed. The phone lines at the Treasury Department are burning up as global trade partners try to understand the new reality. The administration has already signaled the imposition of sweeping tariffs, ignoring the warnings of traditional economists who predict inflation. But inside the West Wing, these warnings are viewed as the gasps of a dying globalist order. The goal is clear: to force supply chains back onto American soil through brute economic force. We are seeing CEOs of major corporations, who previously distanced themselves from the president, now rushing to the White House to pledge investment in domestic manufacturing. They understand that in this new ecosystem, proximity to the president is the only hedge against punitive regulation. On the international stage, the reaction is a mixture of panic and opportunistic calculation. In the capitals of Europe, emergency meetings are being held. The NATO alliance, the bedrock of Western security for 75 years, is suddenly standing on shaky ground. Leaders who relied on the American security umbrella are realizing that the rent is due and the landlord is no longer interested in promises. Conversely, in capitals governed by strongmen, there is a sense of relief. The pressure on human rights and democratic norms has evaporated overnight. The White House has made it clear foreign policy will be transactional. If a nation buys American goods and cooperates on counterterrorism, its internal politics are its own business. The era of America as the global policeman of morality is officially over. As we navigate through these layers of change, we must address the transformation of the truth itself. The press briefing room, once the primary conduit of information, has become a secondary theater. The administration is bypassing the mainstream media entirely, utilizing a network of friendly podcasts, social media platforms, and direct-to-voter communication channels. This has created a hermetically sealed information ecosystem. When the president declares a success, millions of Americans accept it as fact instantly, regardless of what the data says. When he declares a threat, the fear is real. This fragmentation of reality means that there is no longer a single American narrative. There are two distinct realities coexisting in the same geography, with no bridge between them. The psychological weight of this new era is perhaps heaviest on the younger generation of Americans. For those under 30 who have only known a polarized political landscape, this feels less like a return to the past and more like a venture into the unknown. We are seeing a surge in political engagement, but it is driven by anxiety rather than hope. University campuses are on edge, anticipating clashes over free speech and funding. The administration has signaled a war on woke ideology in education, threatening to strip federal funding from institutions that do not align with its patriotic curriculum. This battle for the classroom is arguably the most critical for the long-term future of the country, as it seeks to shape the worldview of the next generation. But amidst the executive orders and the strategic upheaval, there is a human element inside the White House that is often overlooked. The court that surrounds the president is a volatile place. Loyalty is tested daily. We are hearing of a culture of intense paranoia, where staffers are recording meetings and keeping detailed logs to protect themselves. The pressure to deliver on the president's ambitious timeline is immense. Burnout is expected to be high, but there is a long line of eager replacements waiting in the wings, true believers who see this administration as their last chance to save the country. This fervor gives the administration a manic energy that is sustaining it through these early, sleepless days. As we reach the conclusion of this initial assessment, we are left with a picture of a presidency that is radically different from any that came before it. Even the President's own first term. The hesitation is gone. The guardrails are gone. The internal opposition has been purged. What remains is a pure, distilled expression of executive will. The system of checks and balances, designed by the founders to move slowly and deliberate carefully, is being stress-tested by a machine built for speed and dominance. The question that hangs over the National Mall tonight is not what will happen next. We know what will happen next. The plans have been published. The question is whether the institutions of American democracy are resilient enough to absorb this shock, or if they will be permanently reshaped in the image of one man. For the historians watching, this is a defining chapter. For the citizens living it, it is a daily reality that demands attention. The White House has changed. It is quieter, sharper, and more dangerous to its enemies than ever before. The experiment of 1776 has entered a new phase, and the results will not be known for years to come. But one thing is certain. The world is watching, and America will never be quite the same again. This has been a special report on the shifting power dynamics within the United States government. We will continue to monitor these developments as the situation evolves. Stay tuned.